Audience and Purpose, Chapter 5, Who Reads What and Why? Most people do not spend enough time, or really any time, planning what they are going to say before they sit down to write it. However, before you begin writing, you should first identify your goal, then think about your audience, and then determine your tone and format based on the first two criteria. From here, you can map out your content, organize, and begin drafting. For this slideshow, we will be discussing criteria of audience. So why is it important to know your audience? Well, everything you write is a reflection of you. If, for example, you send a quick email or memo with poor grammar or punctuation, you look sloppy and disorganized. More importantly, everything you write has a goal. You might want your reader to come to a meeting, fill out a form correctly, buy into a project, assign a new project, obtain grant money, the list goes on. By knowing your audience and what they expect, you are more likely to be met with success. We will look at an example of this in a few minutes. Readers are responsible for interpreting the text. It doesn't matter what you mean to say. What matters is how are they interpreting what you've presented them. As writers, we often write for what's in our head. However, you're not in the room with the reader to explain or clarify what you mean. Therefore, your text must be clear in order to minimize various interpretations. Readers are radars of information. What I mean by this is, how many of you read Chapter 5 word for word, even the examples and explanations? Probably not many of you. That is because as readers, we develop skills for reading, such as seeking out the necessary information. How you present the information, either through bullet points, block text, paragraphs, makes a difference in how you communicate to your audience. Readers need to know information. Readers prefer concise text. How many of you hate it when you're reading an article or a review and the writer takes forever to get to their main point? It's frustrating. And then you have to go back sometimes and reread it, trying to see if maybe you forgot something or missed something. Besides texts, readers prefer documents with graphics and effective page design to get information across. Professional writers think in terms of primary and secondary readers. Primary readers are those you're directly addressing. They are the action takers. Secondary readers can include others who may also end up seeing your message. You report in writing to your boss, and he or she reports to his or her boss, perhaps incorporating what you sent him or her, and so on up the line it goes. This can happen with emails, a memo, a report, or anything that you've created in the business setting. Secondary readers often advise the primary readers. They are experts in the field or have a specific knowledge base that the primary readers need in order to make a decision. For example, if you are a writer in an engineering firm and you have some questions, you might need to go to someone who has specific knowledge that you do not have. Tertiary readers are anyone else who may have an interest in the subject matter you are presenting. They are often an evaluator at work, your team or company, the competition, an auditor, etc. Finally, gatekeepers are those who look over your document before it goes out to primary readers. They are often your immediate boss or supervisor, your peer cohort, or team members. It could also be someone who has a cultural experience with a foreign company. In this class, it will be your fellow students. Your job is to orient the reader to the information. In written text, this can be more difficult than you think. In 1971, a psychologist studied the way that we communicate and found that 55% of communicating is body language, 38% is tone, and 7% is based in words. Therefore, when we communicate through the written word, we're missing the tone of voice and body language altogether. This absence can make it hard to know what the writer actually means. Using sarcasm in an email can be risky because with only the written word to bear your message, your meaning is open to interpretation. But also, just assuming the reader understands a certain term or jargon can lead to misinterpretation. Taking these points into account, when you begin to write, you want to break down who your readers are and what their values are, what their needs are, which is why are they reading this, and what their attitudes are, attitudes towards you and towards the subject matter. For example, if your boss is reading this, he or she will value efficiency and consistency. Experts value accuracy and feasibility. By understanding your audience on this level, you can begin to visualize what questions or objections they might have to your topic, approach, etc. Language is an important fact as well. Turn to page 82 in your book. Markle makes some pretty broad assumptions. For example, if you look under the second bullet point, he refers to nurses as female through the entire section, where the other bullet points refer to persons in a role as both male and female. These broad generalizations may seem small to some, but can be largely offensive to others. We need to consistently think about the culture the person is coming from and what is appropriate language-wise for that culture, as well as gender, age, titles, assumptions, things along those lines. For example, when I talk about gender and titles and assumptions, how would you address me, Heather Caldwell? Am I MRS? Am I MISS? Am I MS? Do you know? What do you do when you don't know? Often, we have to let a person dictate how they want to be called. MISS has gone out along with the Southern Belle era. Unless you are 12 or under, that's probably not the best way to approach someone. However, MRS and MS are terms that we see frequently. MRS is reserved for those who are married, and MS is a general term referred to those who prefer not to be indicated either as married or single. It's much better to go by MS and then allow them to tell you if they want to be dressed as MRS. So that's pretty simple. You can tell that's a gendered name, Heather Caldwell. You can tell that I'm a female. We have a few options to choose from, but it's pretty straightforward. What if you don't know? What if your name is Kirby Smith? Is this a male or a female? How do you address someone? Do you just call them by their first name? Do you just call them by their last name? Do you do K. Smith? All of these things are things that we need to take into consideration. And these are often dictated by cultural norms, gender norms, the age, and our political and economic statuses. So these are some things that you need to start taking into consideration as you continue to address people in the professional world. Here are some things to keep in mind. Limit your vocabulary. You were taught to use those SAT words in a lot of your English classes. However, this is business writing. You want to use words that the majority of your audience will know. Your sentences should be short and to the point. If you have abbreviations or acronyms, you definitely need to define them. And although your primary audience may know your jargon, your secondary audience may not. So it's important to know what your readers are familiar with. Avoid idioms and slang, as these do not always transcend cultures. Use the active voice whenever possible, and we're going to deal more with this in a little bit. Be careful with graphics. Graphics are something that we like to see in our documents. However, we have to be careful what we choose. For example, in America, the garbage can icon or trash can, right, on your laptop often looks like a wire basket. Well, in other cultures, they might use a box, so that wire basket might not be representative of an actual garbage can. So things like this, these small things, really can make a huge difference. If you are writing to someone of a different culture, it's really important to have your document reviewed by someone who is familiar with the cultural norms of your audience. All right, now go ahead and proceed on to Chapter 14 slideshow.